Is Overwatch dying? Well, based solely on the numbers, the game is certainly on a downward trend, but that isn't the full story. I figure what better way to rate hero shooters than by the very thing that defines them: heroes. In this video, I'll take a look at the average tier list rankings for both Marvel Rivals and Overwatch characters to see players' sentiment towards the current state of the games. Let's get into it. For starters, we need character ranking, which I obviously won't base on my own opinion. Since there are no official surveys, I went online and found the most up-to-date tier lists I could, then did my best to average out the ranking data for more accurate scoring. For instance, if one list puts a character at S while another puts them at B, they would average out to the A tier. Firstly, and arguably most importantly, I'm looking for universal balance. Ideally, most characters should fall evenly within these A and B tiers, while less sit up top at S and as few as possible land in C and D. Secondly, many characters clustered in an undesirable area, for instance rows B and C, is a sign that very few characters belong in the meta, making for a very repetitive gameplay experience. Lastly, character roles should be as uniform as possible across the tiers. If damage characters dominate A and S while tanks are almost exclusively stuck in C, you've got a balance problem. With that out of the way, let's look at these charts. Overwatch's stats surprised me quite a bit. The bottom half of the list starts strong, with very few characters. Moving up to S, once again, strong. Not few enough to be boring, but also not too many. A tier gives us more of what we're looking for, but B poses the first issue. It's almost double the size of A. Now, more heroes in B isn't inherently an issue, but in this case, it's definitely too many characters clustered in one tier. The lack of equality with A tier signifies that players see more characters as mid-tier rather than leaning towards a positive sentiment, which, while not being game-breaking, isn't ideal. Before we get on with the Rivals tier list, most people watching these videos are seeing me for the very first time. If you like this kind of content, definitely leave a like to let the YouTube algorithm know, and if you want to see more from me specifically, go ahead and subscribe to know exactly when I upload next. Rivals, on the other hand, aligned with my expectations pretty well, with a few in D and C, a healthy number in S, and a startlingly even mix between A and B. The only thing holding this back from being perfect is a slightly higher number in C than I would have liked, but other than that, Rivals has passed flawlessly. But don't leave thinking that that's the conclusion. We've spoken on the first two criteria, universal balancing and clustering in the wrong areas, because those generally go hand in hand. Before we make harsh judgments though, let's take a look at role distribution. For ease of comparison, I'll be calling all character roles by the standard names, because Vanguard, Duelist, and Strategist would make this video pretty obnoxious to listen to. Overwatch's supports are very evenly distributed, with slightly more ending up in A. The tanks and DPSs, on the other hand, mostly sit in B, with the same number in C as in S tier. This implies that these roles have far fewer enjoyable characters than they should, placing tank and DPS at an overall mid-tier. Rivals, once again, surprised me here. The tanks are literally perfect, none in D and very even distribution between A and B. DPSs are also pretty balanced, with disappointingly only 2 in S, but I also think there's something to be said about too much damage output being a bad thing, so maybe it's for the best that the bulk of them sit in A and B. Support is the only role that flopped here, but it's not in the way that you might think. There are practically none in the bottom half, and S tier is loaded, even though there are far fewer supports at this point than tanks or DPSs. While it is a shame that Rivals can't seem to keep their supports from being extremely overpowered, I would definitely prefer more high-ranked characters than low-ranked ones. With all this taken into account, Rivals has a slight edge in both character and role balance based upon tier lists. This is obviously not an exact science, but it gives an interesting view into why one game might have an edge over another commercially. In the case of these games, Rivals simply has more characters in the A to B sweet spot and only struggles to keep its supports in check when it comes to balancing. This by no means makes it a better game by default, but it might make you think twice before asking why so many people are leaving Overwatch.